It's the Sod Pod, brought to you by Grassland Agro. The Sod Pod. Hello, and welcome to the Sod Pod. This is episode 4 of season 4. All the fours. And speaking of 4 seasons, the weather. Clodagh, where's it all going at the moment?
I suppose, Jim, all along, weather has been fine. It's ideal conditions for grazing. The last, I suppose, week or so, we have got a bit of rain. Mm-hmm. Was kind of needed as well, to get things going. But I suppose soil temperature, it is creeping up week by week. But I know there is a bit of heat now coming next week. So hopefully now between the moisture and the bit of heat now next week, grass will come booming again. Yeah. What do you think, lads?
Yeah, sure, love it. We've been sort of, I suppose, when you look back on the history of the Springs, I suppose we got away pretty well this year. Mm-hmm. It was a great opportunity to get through kind of that spring workload in the field, so we don't, the last 2 years we didn't get the every seeding, it was a good chance to get up to the fertiliser up to date.
Especially with crops too as well, we got a great opportunity there to get the spring crops in, and there was that burst of rain then just to get them established as well. And a good opportunity to get fertiliser out when it was needed. A little bit tricky with the cold for putting sprays out, the likes of growth regulators and herbicides, but
why is it tricky with the cold? What?
Just with stress, particularly with winter crops, they tend to need plant growth regulators quite early in the spring and herbicides, the follow-up herbicides, but you have to be careful with nighttime temperatures.
Yes.
When there's a fluctuation between the day temperature and the night temperature. If you throw in growth regulators which manipulate growth, it can just stress the crop. Yeah. So it's all about applying them in the right conditions.
And in the ideal scenario, Stephen, what is the temperatures we're sort of looking to stabilise over that couple of 3-day window or whatever it is?
Well, I suppose for crops, you're probably looking around 7 or 8 degrees day and night time for hard hitting herbicides and growth regulators. And even with grassland, the likes of putting out herbicides, particularly the clover safe herbicides, because clover is very sensitive. You need probably 8 degrees 3 days before and after applying them, and I think that's why we see some stunting in grass sometimes when we apply herbicides. So it's just something to keep in mind.
And I suppose we haven't had that conditions kind of all along. Even you were showing me an app there the last day by Corvita, is it?
Cortiva, yeah.
Cortiva, yeah. That'll give you kind of a traffic light system whether you're okay to go with your spray and things like that.
Yeah, very handy just to use that technology that's available. Yeah.
Is that free to use? Or?
It is, yeah.
Oh, brilliant. Yeah. I might stick a link into the body of the podcast there for that. It's very useful.
Very for herbicides, yeah.
I suppose we were talking about the weather from an animal health point of view. I'll talk a bit more about it later on, but the weather has fluctuated an awful lot over the month of April there and coming into May now. So things like grass tetany is something to be mindful of. The nights have been cold. We've gone through a period of maybe very warm weather. Temperatures have dropped a bit, and when the rain has come, it's come hard. So we'll talk a bit about that later on, but it's just something to bear in mind.
Yes, yeah. Mm-hmm. One of the, I suppose, it's been a nice spring. It's been a lovely start to the year. Obviously, there's an issue. Temperatures were that bit lower, which is holding back a bit of growth. Then the rain came. It rained there now 3 weeks, which was needed, which is great to see. The problem is some of it was big deluges of rain, and that caused a different problem as well that we have to wear. That could wash a lot of stuff away very quickly as well, can't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. But I suppose with this we're all the time watching kind of the weather forecast, and obviously the best practice is when we're seeing this heavy rain coming, you're not going to go out and play it.
Yeah.
But it's at the same time up around our own part of the world, like right in the northeast, the rain was very welcome. Because I was at the stage now it was starting to, obviously got way through the first grades and very well in a lot of places. There was no issues. Fertiliser was out up to date that way. So really all that was lacking at that stage nearly was the bit of rain, and as you were saying at the start, with a bit of heat coming now, I think we're going to start eventually able to move into those 21-day rotations that we really want to. What the target is for the time of year.
I suppose covers now that are quite good at the moment should drive on now. The bigger canopy should lap up the sunlight, and you should be getting nearly 100 a day, leading up to the first cut silage. Yeah. I suppose it's just I suppose the lower covers now that might need a bit of a kick, but. And
what are you seeing? I suppose in what niche areas silage has it started now, or what way is it looking now?
Yeah.
Getting close there, yeah.
Yeah, I suppose, like as we were saying earlier, we're just lacking that little bit of heat now to drive on the road.
Yeah. No, we see there up, again, referring up to around the northeast, there is an odd field taken out. Some guys are starting to now, use it as an opportunity to skim the ground, get a bit of reseeding done early, and even some of the ATCs in the north have been doing some of the cutting ways, But I suppose use some of the geology to show us that, Clodagh.
I suppose, look, like coming into the next few weeks now, our ATCs on the road are going to be busy doing the next step of our soil sustainability programme. So I suppose if there's any new listeners out there that aren't familiar with the programme, there is a previous episode done on that if you just scroll back. But look, the next step of our soil sustainability programme is the pre-harvest assessment. So basically there's 3 different parts to that. So we go out and we cut and weigh the silage, so to calculate, I suppose, the yield. We go out and we test the grass for sugars and nitrates as well to make sure that it's ready to be cut. So basically when we go out and cut and weigh the silage, I suppose it gives the farmer an idea of what they're growing, what nutrient offtakes are going to be there as well. So basically what we do, I just have a few props here of what we use. We go out and we throw a quadrant, so it's a 1/2 metre by 1/2 metre, and we throw it into an area that has, I suppose, an accurate representation of what's actually in the field. So we cut the grass within that quadrant at more height, we bag it and we weigh it using one of these, I suppose, scales, yeah, thanks. So we use the scales and so we calculate the yield of the grass. So I actually have a calculation done out here. So last year actually on the soil sustainability programme, in the first cut silage we cut and weighed, it was 1,200 cut and weighs we done, and the average yield of those turned out to be 6.4 tonnes of dry matter per hectare. So let's say if you go out and within that quadrant you weigh 850 grams of grass, so turning that into kilograms is 0.85. You need to multiply that by the dry matter percentage. So if any farmers are looking for that percentage, Teagasc record that once a day or once every couple of days, and that's put on all their social media. So let's say you take that 0.85 and you multiply it by the dry matter percentage. So look, for today we'll work with 18%, so 0.18. That gives you a figure of 0.53 kilos of dry matter. So that's within that square quadrant. So with that quadrant, there's 40,000 quadrants in a hectare. So you multiply that figure by 40,000 and that gives you a figure of 6,120 kilos of dry matter per hectare. So that's 6.1 tonne of dry matter per hectare in that crop. So I suppose the next stage of the programme as well is we go out and test the grass for sugars and nitrates. So with the sugars, we use garlic crusher. We take a piece of grass and we put it into the garlic crusher and we crush it until a bit of juice comes out of it, and we use what's called a refractometer. So the refractometer gives you a figure, I think it's like a brick scale is what they use, but basically just think of it as a sugar scale. So ideally you'd want to be coming out with a percentage anywhere between 3 and 5%. So it's very important that you have high sugar levels in your grass when you're going to cut, so that you can produce that lactic acid, lower the pH in your silage crop and get a good fermentation, and also for palatability for the animals as well. So just another part of that as well, we use what's called nitrate strips. So you probably can't see it here now, but there's a scales on this nitrate strip. So I'll just show you now. It's just a little white strip, and we dip it into that bit of grass juice, and that'll turn a purple colour. So the darker the purple, the more nitrates that are in the grass. So ideally you wouldn't want any more than 500 milligrams per kilogram. And if there's too much nitrates in your grass, it can be quite toxic to animals as well, and it can lead to a bad fermentation as well. So, I suppose it's a very important step of the programme. It's not just about, obviously it's about making good quality silage, but it's also looking at the bigger picture, nutrient use efficiency, not impacting soil health as well.
And that's probably like the sugar, when you look at the sugar element of it, that's really the key part, because ultimately that's the food source that's there for the bacteria that will, depending on below that pH, and ultimately ferment the silage that we're going to be feeding out. And I suppose even from the cut and weigh point of view, I know we have various different listeners, and sometimes when we're out in farm we get different questions coming in from what we discussed about. Like, why are we looking at that cutting weight, Clodagh? Like, we're talking about 6.2, 6.4 tonne of dry matter, was it?
Yeah, it was 6.4, yeah.
Like, in a lot of cases they are, you know, when you talk to farmers, probably don't really, you know, they mightn't do their cutting weighs before a silage cut. They might routinely do it on their paddocks, you know, but they're always kind of working off 5.5 tonne
That's right,
dry matter.
yeah.
It's like there's nearly, you know, a tonne of dry matter extra there. I suppose from a nutrient point of view, like, why that's ultimately why we're doing it. You know, we're trying to balance the P's, the K's.
So like that extra tonne you're getting is brilliant. Like, there's an extra tonne, but the problem is to get that tonne you've took so many more nutrients out of the ground, and that's where you can be caught in with, oh geez, why have I gone from index 3 to index 2? Because there's an extra tonne coming off that, and, you know.
Like, you'd even see that, like, if you're skipping that tonne there, you know, you're putting your fertiliser on to get your second cut in. You know, you're thinking you're replacing your nutrients, but you know, even from some of the work that you have there, Clodagh, the second cut figures were similar. They're all, like, there was some of them second cuts over 5 tonne per hectare, which commonly people might be working off closer to 4.
Yes.
You know, so all of a sudden you have 2 tonne extra.
Yes.
You know, so it's a snowballing effect, and each year, you know, it's just about being dialed in what's coming off that you're actually getting it replaced. You know,
and we often see it with the soil testing we're doing across farms. You'll often pick out where the silage ground is just looking at the soil tests, because they are worn down. They tend to be index 1 and 2 for P's and K's, so it's just about replacing them off takes, making use of your slurry, targeting those fields with lower indexes.
Yeah, I suppose it's all about assessing where your crop is at. You know, these tools give you a great idea where your crop is at in terms of when to cut it. Like, a big debate now is like cutting date. When is the optimum time to cutting, so that you're going to get your kind of DMD of 75% or whatever that you're trying to target. You know, because if you're going to leave it too late, you are dropping your DMD. Just as a goal, like, you know, is it the 22nd of May, or is it the 14th of May, is it the 7th of May, which is the best cutting day for you? These tools will, you know, help you make them decisions. Yeah,
it allows for better decision making, I suppose. You know, it just gives the farmer that bit of comfort that there's going to be no high nitrogen in it. Joe, he's happy enough with the crop of silage that's there, and that there's good sugars in it. And I suppose even, Peter, what you were saying about, you know, looking towards second cut silage, like, it's so important to replace those P's and K's. Like, I suppose from a figure perspective, like, every tonne of grass you take in the form of silage, it's an off take of 4 kilos of P and 25 kilos of K. Like, that's just a maintenance that has to be back on it. Like, if you're looking to build indexes, if your silage ground is index 1 or 2, you know, you're going to have to go with a little bit more, whether it's your chemical fertiliser or slurry, like, you know.
Yeah, and even there, something we've seen now in plans to incorporate, like, MOP at the back end.
Yeah.
You know, we've no restrictions in terms of how much that we can purchase, in terms of the fertiliser database regulation, but even in terms of when we can spread that, you know, there's no cut off. Like, that is something to, even if you are in a deficit during the year, and for whatever reason, you know, there's only so much you can put on in a particular period of time to avoid luxury uptake of K. So it's important then at the end of the year we can factor that in and ultimately just tweak it, that, you know, for year 2 and 3 going forward, that it's factored in, you know.
And P and K is so important, just for nitrogen use efficiency. If you can get it from index 1, 2 up to 3 and 4, like, you're getting increasing the nitrogen use efficiency, and that's obviously going to increase yields or cut costs on the farm. So
I suppose then when we talk about P and K, like, I was on a farm up there yesterday in my home country in Roscommon, and we were just talking about the importance of maybe even testing your slurry just to see how much K is in it, you know, per 1,000 gallon, because, you know, it will replace an awful lot of your K off takes, you know, and it's no harm to know that figure, you know.
I suppose even when we were talking about, like, you know, the fertiliser, in terms of calibration, Stephen, you were doing a little bit of looking into this.
Yeah, I was at a few farm walks recently, and there was a lot of talk about fertiliser spreader calibration. I suppose, compared to other machines, like your slurry tanker, if the splash plate is bent, you know, you're going to notice that it's not going out, but you'll see it out the back window. But the fertiliser spreader, it could be a couple of weeks before you see any differences if it's not being applied correctly. And even with that, there needs to be a 25% coefficient of variation in the fertiliser application before you'll actually see a visual difference. So there could be even, I suppose you could call it subclinical issues there. You wouldn't actually see it, even if there's no stripe, and the fertiliser might be applied correctly. So I suppose in terms of just getting things right, there's a few simple things just to look at, and they're worth looking at every so often, just making sure the fertiliser spreader is level on the tractor, making sure the arms are the right length. making sure the fertiliser spreader is the right height off the ground. Like an Amazon spreader might be 80 centimetres off the ground, whereas a Rouch might be different, might be only 50 centimetres, just to check things like that. I suppose one of the big things at the farm walks was the conditions of the fertiliser spreader vanes. So it's a very easy thing to overlook, but they are the most important part on the fertiliser spreader. So as the fertiliser is dropped onto the disc, it's spinning, and the granule, it's travelling along the vein. So the vein is what's putting all the energy into the fertiliser to throw it. But if the vein is worn, if there's holes in it, it's obviously going to be a huge issue with the spread pattern. But even like you'll see in a lot of spreaders, the veins will be rippled. That's the way they wear.
Yes, yeah.
So they're not smooth. So if the granule hits a ripple, it's going to fly off the vein too early. It won't have enough energy, and it's going to distort the spread pattern. So it's just something that's easy to check, but it's probably wrong in a lot of fertiliser spreaders in the country.
Yeah.
And like, to level a fertiliser spreader is so easy. Right, when you have it on, just stand at the back, have a look, and is it square with the roof of the cab? Like, that's just a really quick one, isn't it? 'Cause you know, and I've seen a couple of square ones now at nearly 30 degrees out. You know, it's just a nice quick visual there straight away.
Yeah.
The veins, it's very obvious. You can see that rippling or that waving effect. Like, and they're just quick checks. Lovely.
Quick checks.
Once a week, you know, just quick look. We'll always check the level of the roof, of course, every time we go up. But quick checks.
And front to back too with the level. You want your disc level as well. It might be just a couple of turns to a top link, but it'll stop it either thrown into the ground or thrown into the air, because it's very easy to spread stuff wrong. And even at the farm walks, we were looking at spreaders, and we done a tray test which shows the spread pattern of the spreader. And it was a modern spreader. The farmer was using the app, because a lot of spreaders have apps now for setting them correctly, but it was even still a little bit out. So it could be worth looking into, as it was said at the talk. A discussion group buying a set of tray tests.
Yes.
Even for a few €100, it wouldn't be too bad if you 15 in a discussion group. Just something you could check even once or twice a year. It'd be a lot better than not checking it all, just to make sure things are going out right.
And I suppose with the app as well, it can kind of tell you, you know, what settings to use based on what product you use, and that's fair enough to say as well, like depending on your density, your bulk density, your...
Well, that's a huge thing too, fertiliser quality, because I suppose like your bulk density, as you said there, I was passing around litre bottles. I'd filled a litre of urea and a litre of can, but I had people holding their hands, and a huge difference in the weight.
Yes, yeah.
Obviously the same volume, but a huge difference in the weight.
Yeah.
I suppose the classic example is it's a lot easier to throw a golf ball across the room in comparison to a ping pong ball.
Yeah.
You need a lot more energy to throw a ping pong ball or urea, a lighter product. So it's very important to take that into consideration when you're setting a fertiliser spreader.
And I suppose the border control mechanisms as well in your newer spreaders is important too, like respecting your buffer zones, you know, to improve water quality and all that kind of stuff is important too.
Yeah, very important to have them working correctly. You just obviously don't want to be throwing fertiliser into waterways for environmental reasons and economical reasons too. Yeah. But then on fertiliser quality again, like there's other parameters we love to look at too, the likes of granule strength. You need a strength. If you do a crush test, it should be over 3 kilos of force to break a granule. If it's a poor quality, it's going to smash and impact with the disc, and that won't spread. Dust won't spread very far at all to go out behind the tractor. And the other one is granule size as well. So it's very easy to do a sieve test, and you want your granules between 3 and 4.5 mil, or most of them anyway. And again, some of the apps, if you do a sieve test, you can input the proportions of the granule size into the app, and it'll give you the correct calibration. So it's just important to use those tools, and you can really improve your spread pattern, which if you're getting the even amount across the area, you're going to increase your nitrogen use efficiency too.
Yeah. I had a really interesting conversation with a contractor a few months ago, right? And he was explaining, he'd like advising lads and chatting to people that are doing the road. The contractor does his job and all. Yeah. But he was trying to explain to a couple of his neighbours and his friends, right? So they were setting up their fertiliser spreader. They had their lovely GPS tracker, and they were going, it was say 20 metres they were going spreading, right? And up and down the drive their fields, you know, and they're watching the map fill in with the red that you've hit your zones, and look at that, I have full coverage. They weren't actually checking, because remember the GPS tracker doesn't know where the grain is actually going. It's only presuming what you've set the spreader for. So like lads were like, how am I getting striping? And I'm covering, I'm nailed on driving up and down my field, filling in me map, colouring it in as he worded it. But the problem was they weren't actually doing those basic steps of setting up the spreader, in some cases doing the trait test, getting the bulk densities right, seeing where we are. So like what they thought was great, colouring in their map really efficiently, the fertiliser wasn't spreading that width at all, you know, and they were leaving blank. So it's just, the GPS tracker isn't on every grain of fertiliser, it's based on where the spreader is set for, but is it going that far, you know.
There's actually a very good video as well done by John Corbett, John O'Loughlin and Ian Connaughton. You might link it maybe to the podcast, but everything there that Stephen was talking about is done all visually, like, you know, it's so important now, you know, even with your nitrates allowances and everything, you know, to make sure that, you know, you're not getting shiping and that it's going into the right place. Like.
And the beauty of that video as well, for anyone that's missing Ed's hair from today's show, Ian Connaughton is the second best hair in grassland, so you can see him on the video.
The best now, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly, If you're having withdrawal symptoms, have a look at Ian.
Very good.
I suppose from fair to say, Stephen, I know you do a lot of work with tillage ground. Like that's probably something that a lot of them tillage guys tend to obviously putting on a lot larger quantities of fertiliser.
Yeah.
But that's probably something that there's even more accuracy zoned in, you know, down to nearly 2 centimetres of ground level, or what do you?
It's hugely important on tillage farms because you're going to be spreading 30 metres, some lads are on 36 metres. So in them situations, you need to be doing tray tests really with every different product. You won't get away with it at all, and you need good conditions as well. A windy day, it's going to affect spread patterns as well. You probably need calmer conditions, and like everything is just sort of intensified. You just need it absolutely perfect for them large spread widths, because you obviously don't want lodging in crops. But and just you can use the apps, and a lot of the apps have each product on them now that's available in Ireland. So, but again, you need to, even though the apps will give you a good indication of how to set your veins, your drop points, it's very important to cross check it with a tray test.
Yeah.
The tray test is a bit time consuming. I'm busy, right? I'm trying to dodge weather here and the whole lot. But like, if you went out and bought, we just got to go raw here, you bought 10 tonne of protected urea, right, and it's in your yard, and you're going to be spreading that over the next 3 months across your following your nutrient management plan. But like, in theory, you could do that tray test today, because you know that 10 tonne is from the same yard at the same time, and then you've that 10 tonne on, you know your settings for that 10 tonne. Do you know what I mean? One of the risks is you have your settings for the urea that you bought in January, you bought more in May, it's come from a different source or whatever. You might have to redo that one again. That's something to bear in mind sometimes as well, isn't it? But you could do your tray test for that one batch for it, because, you know, if you're managing a good nutrient management plan, you might have 3 or 4 different versions of fertiliser been bought into the farm, and you could go out and, like, the thing set up now, I'm going to run this test here on Tuesday and have it done, and I know where I am at 10 bags. Just something to bear in mind, I think, as well. Not always straightforward, but it is a nicer way of maybe just picking off that job. I'm going to spend 90 minutes doing my couple of bags and see where I am.
Yeah, because you'd see that, like, I know you said there, Stephen, about you had the 2 bottles and you went around with the different weights, like about 2 litre bottles, but you could see like up to 15 grams in that litre of a difference. Like, so for that reason, like it's going to be a huge difference ultimately when that hits the vein in terms of its throwing. You know, that weights a lot. And
as you said, James, between batches or different sources, you can get a can at 101 specific gravity, and you can get one at 110 as well. And that's a huge difference in spreadability. Yeah. So definitely something to bear in mind.
I suppose for anyone listening there, like, it is tricky enough to understand all that. If you have any questions, to get in contact with your local rep. You know, because they're all trained, and we've done a demonstration days there last November and December with the company, and you know, there's advice there to be given if you need it.
I suppose the tillage, where is the tillage at now, Stephen? Spring and winter crops, is it?
Yeah, things are looking well, in fairness. I suppose throughout the spring, as I said earlier, winter crops a little bit stressed with the cold weather, but they're sort of coming out there now, a bit of rain. Likes of winter barley, last fungicide's probably on most crops now. So the sink is there, the grain sites are there. It's nearly a matter of praying for a bit of sunshine now. For likes of winter barley, kind of similar to oilseed rape. A lot of the work is done, it's just a matter of praying for sun. Likes of wheat, T1s are on. And look, wheat is always about keeping septoria with the last 3 leaves, particularly the flag leaf, just to maintain your green leaf area. So that's just something to be mindful of, and keeping green the leaf if it needs trace elements, etc., just to get them on. It's worth investing in the crop, because there is good yield potential there in crops this year. I suppose in terms of spring barley is the big spring crop. I'd say most herbicides are on now, wild oat sprays are done, and I'd say broadleaf weed control has been followed up on too. So it'll be just, I suppose for mutton varieties, they tend to have poor straw strength. So we now have to look into putting a growth regulator on them at growth stage 30 or so, and just keeping an eye on the recommended lists for disease resistances, and just know which variety you have and what disease to be looking out for, whether it's net blotch or rhynchosporium. And then I suppose the last one was beet. A lot of beet went in early, so it was great to get it in early. But yeah, I suppose the big one of beet is the weed control, and just getting the herbicides on in good conditions that aren't going to stress the beet. We lost the triflusulfuron methyl there this year, so it's going to be a little bit trickier. The other remaining herbicides could be a little more stressful on the crop, so it's just important to get them on in the right conditions, active growing conditions, and at the right time and before the weeds are too strong. But yeah, I think there's good yield potential there anyway. It's looking positive enough on the crops front. Hopefully the prices lift up a bit is the only thing, but sure, that's out of our hands anyway.
John, if you were to look at animal health issues at this time of the year,
I suppose we were talking about the weather there a while ago. The weather has fluctuated an awful lot over the last few weeks. In terms of temperatures, they've been up and down, cold during the night. The rain, when it did come, it came hard. Which made conditions kind of, it brought on tetany, in some cases, and it's grass tetany is something to be definitely wary of this time of year. In ewes and cows, I suppose, take ewes for example. If grass utilisation is impaired, it affects their ability to get magnesium into their diet. They don't readily have magnesium in their system, so if they're not getting grass in, it can be a problem. Things like providing a high magnesium bucket lick, providing concentrates post-lambing for a short period are good ways of, I suppose, preventing the problem. I think the big thing with grass tetany is prevention.
What causes grass tetany?
I suppose, take for example there, ewes grazing lush grass on high potassium soils. That can cause grass tetany because I suppose the magnesium is being locked up and it's just not getting into their bodies and their bloodstream. So that's an issue, and the same with cows as well. The weather fluctuating does affect magnesium getting into them. Things like giving them CalMag or boluses is a good way of, I suppose, ensuring that they have magnesium in their diet. I suppose blocks as well, but I suppose to ensure that they have it being intaken, I suppose giving them boluses is a good option, But it's a big issue. I suppose another one this time of year is coccidiosis. No harm observing your lambs or your calves out grazing at the moment. Coccidiosis kind of comes across as kind of a black scour, black mucus. Can have a big impact on their performance and their growth. There's various products in the market that can be used to treat it. So it's another thing to look out for this time of year, I suppose.
Even there, something there we've heard over the last month or so, I suppose it's common on this time of year is the rumen acidosis, particularly this time of year, I suppose, where we went into the second round, covers probably just weren't where we wanted them. They might have been below that, say, 1400 stage. They were lacking that fibre, which obviously then we can increase that risks of ultimately getting that drop in pH. And obviously, and you get the knock-on effects and the butter fat in the milk tank, and ultimately the rumen's out of sync in terms of pH and so it likes the fibre, putting that back into the diet if there's a way of buffering. That's something else there. Just a couple have said to me there over the last month that farms are seeing that a wee bit too.
I suppose prevention is better than a cure, as the saying goes. If there's high risk periods coming, for the likes of grass tetany, to offer the magnesium before the risk period comes, it's crucially important.
Absolutely.
Would you be advocates for a bale of hay in the field at this time of year, or?
Usually straw at the barrier, even I know in the cow's position can be if you have a history, I suppose, of it, you can definitely increase the fibre, and if you have a history there, or you're looking that your paddocks are behind and you're still supplementing, obviously going into them lower covers a little bit. So absolutely, yeah. But
Yeah.
jokes they'll take it if they want to. A lot of the times they mightn't, you know.
I suppose the yos out grazing now, like no harm having a bit of silage out of them just to keep them ticking along. I know back home we'd be big advocates of giving them a bit of concentrates, you know, for a short period after lambing, just to make sure that they're getting the magnesium into the diet, and to give them enough, and to make sure that there's good magnesium in the concentrates that you're giving them, you know. There's a couple of important measures, you know, this time of year.
Yeah, insects haven't seemed to be a major problem, so we're going to see a big spike in that. If they, you know, like we had a warm period, but soil temperatures were low, right? So we've seen a huge amount of. Then we had a deluge of rain. So like, if the weather turns there now, as it's starting to turn again, please God, we're going to see a big spike in insects very quickly as well, and that has its other problems that brings as well, doesn't it? Like,
Yeah, for sure.
I suppose another one not to forget about as well is phosphorus. Do you know, like even coming back to the weather, it hasn't been overly warm, and you know you need soil temperature to be warm for phosphorus to become available. So like phosphorus is very important, especially coming up to the breeding season now and coming up to peak milk production. Like I would always say, you know, if a farmer is kind of concerned about phosphorus levels, it's no harm to have a look at your soil sample results as well. You know, if you've cows grazing in fields that are index 1 and 2 for P, like they're going to be on the back burner already coming up to breeding season. So it's just another thing to keep an eye on, really, coming up to breeding and peak milk production.
Yeah. I suppose like fecal sampling is another big one we might have talked about in the previous episode, just to see where the animals are at in terms of parasites. You know, you mentioned, you know, we've a good block there, the Protect block. Very good at reducing your parasite burden, as we discussed previously, you know. Has, you know, I suppose various benefits in terms of external parasites and your internal ones with the V5 technology. It's definitely something to bear in mind.
I suppose one of the beauty of our blocks as well is that they are sodium based, so they're self-regulated.
Yeah.
Do you know, like the animal is only going to consume as much as they require. Like, do you know, I know sometimes we get queries off farmers being like, oh, Joe, they were mad for the blocks 2 weeks ago and now they haven't touched them. But you know, that's a security for the farmer as well. That's
proven the technology is working.
It's working,
Do you know?
Do you know, they've fulfilled their requirement,
Let's just get enough blocks in enough areas. You know, not oversupply the block, not undersupply. Get enough. Let's follow the maths. The data is there, and get them in the areas. Also, get them in free-flowing areas as well. You know, because if you put one on a bit of a bend and stuff, it can cause blockages, and you know, then that does allow the bully animal to kind of give an out shunt and drive you the lad that needs it out of the way, and he's past it as well. So collecting yards, holding areas, all great little zones for him. You know. Again, get them up head high, as we say, and how tall are you, you know. But if we want to be, look at your animal, we want the neck up, you know what I mean. So it means as they lick, the saliva it's going backwards, going straight into the tongue and into the bloodstream. It's the direct route, so that's why it's head high. It's head high of the animal, lads, you know what I mean. I'm, some would say of average height, others would say slightly below average height. So is it my head height or is it Peter's, you know? But it's the animals, get his neck up, that's what we want, you know.
And that kind of links into what you were saying, Peter, as well, about, you know, stabilising the ruminant pH for acidosis. You know, like our blocks, I suppose they're marine calcium based, so they're very high in calcium and magnesium. So that is going to, you know, have a neutralising effect on the rumen of the animal as well, to prevent the likes of acidosis. So
yeah, exactly. And bear in mind, like, this is the 40th year of Group Ruley, our T-Max animal production range. Like, these blocks are 40 years. These are tried and tested and proved. Look, they're massive. Everyone knows the Lunio-Vital Phos. Okay, I'll say it again. Everyone knows the Lunio-Vital Phos. Obviously it's a new name, it's part of a rebrand, but that is in old money, or Calci Phos, and even some of our guys still call them the Euro block, you know what I mean? It's the same block, but the technology always been increased and improved, you know, and 40 years this year and counting. And the simple fact is, in 80 years time, they'll be celebrating 80 years of these blocks, because they are global and they are superb, easy to use, and the results are there. And speak to the farmers that are using them and they'll tell you as well. You know, as a guy said to me one day, he said, I thought this was crazy putting these things up. I landed them in my yard. The cows looked at them for 4 or 5 days and never went near them. Then they gorged on him. He felt that they were over consuming. He had 2 less in the area than he should have, but that was fine too. And then it just steadied out, and you'll see over the year the consumption goes up and down depending on the concentrates that's been fed. Always remember, is there sodium base? That is the only thing that the animal can self-regulate on, so that's why it's a sodium base. Need water nearby, not beside, because you do get lick drink, which is overconsumption. So never beside the water trough, but have one nearby, because that water just helps to keep the whole system running and get the minerals into the system faster as well. But nearby, not beside.
I suppose, Peter, you've looked into a lot about reseeding and the clover side of things. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, sure, look, I suppose there's probably across the country different stages. Some have reseeds gone in, some are yet to burn off. So I suppose those who have reseeds gone in, look, typically when you're putting clover in the past, it was optional for some farmers or only for over above stocking rate, certain stocking rate. Now it's compulsory. So really, in the ideal scenario, this is the time of year we want to be getting clover. You know, if you're going the clover route, which every family now has to, due to the changes in the regs, it's really kind of in that April period, May time, you want to be incorporating it. So like, look at the various different methods and ways you can do it. You know, if you're doing a full new reseed, it's going to be in the mix, obviously. If you're just wanting to get more clover into old grass, so you can existing swards that are grazed out bare, you can stitch it in, oversow it. I suppose the key point there is that that the paddock was grazed bare, and then that you're pulling back on the nitrogen in those subsequent applications. I suppose looking from the reseeding point of view, then going a full reseed, it's very important, I suppose, that regardless of whether you're ploughing or you're going the min-till route, both can work very well, but just I suppose it's ultimately down to a farmer's preference and be aware of the pros and cons of each. If you're going the ploughing route, that you're not going too deep and ultimately burying a lot of the good soil, good nutrients. If you're going the min-till route, after you burn it off, that you're allowing enough of time, your roundup will actually work its way down into the taproot of the Hawkins, or because ultimately, if you move too quick, that taproot can be still there.
Yes.
And then we get that regermination then in the next phase, and that's typically where your post-emergent spray. We're not trying to kill that taproot at that stage. It's only wee young seedlings we're trying to get at in terms of the weeds. So you really get one chance to kill that root. So it's just, I suppose, being aware of both ways can work well. Just it's down to the farmer choice, and what I suppose that you're aware of the limitations of both. Probably there's various different, I suppose. Look at now, you're talking about tetraploids, diploids, different. You've pasture profit index. You've loads of different, I suppose, options available now in terms of tools to make a choice on grass seeds. I suppose really you just look at if it's a silage situation, where you're going to be cutting this ground continuously for 3+ cuts. You're always going to be looking on the PPI index that you're looking at silage quality. And heading date, that you have a narrow enough range of heading dates, maybe that 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 days, that you're not getting, I suppose, some heading dates in the middle of May, but you're not planning on cutting until maybe the end of June. Which ultimately, what you were saying earlier, John, decreases the quality. And then even. Sorry, you want to say something?
Yeah, look, I suppose reseeding, in a nutshell, is kind of one of the best investments you can make on farm. I suppose a general rule of thumb is if you can reseed about 10% of your farm every year, you're doing well. And you reseed the last, isn't it 10 years?
Yeah, that's generally what you'd be targeting. Look at some place, obviously you're not going to go around 10% all the time, but as a general ballpark, it's a good gauge. But even if you are going to clover and wanting to get more clover, and there's other options available. You don't have to do the full reseed. It can be mix and match. And that you're aware of, I suppose, how to manage it after, because it is going to be that bit different. You're going to have shorter rotations maybe early on to try and manage.
You mentioned the post-emergence herbicide as well. I suppose it's important to get that done, but the timing of it is very important too. The weeds should only have one true leaf, because you have to catch them quite young, because you're going at a lower rate of herbicide, so you don't stunt the sward. And you just have to be particularly careful with the clover now. You need 3 trifoliate leaves on the clover, on white clover, to ensure it's safe and it won't harm the clover. And with red clover, it should be overwintered before you even spray herbicide on it, because it's just particularly sensitive. But it's just something to keep in mind.
And probably winter sprays too. Some of them obviously you'll be, you can graze a week after, some or 2 weeks. But it's very important that you match that into when you want to graze. Because if you let it go too far, ultimately you could have a perennial ryegrass that's gone too far. it's shading out the base of the clover, and next thing your clover's hit. So you miss that chance of establishment, and then you're constantly playing catch up. As you say, it's important to be getting it at the right time. Obviously, that it's for killing the leaves, number one, but that it doesn't jeopardise, I suppose, the management after, and ultimately, affect your reseed, and then you ultimately end up with a poor experience of putting in clover or whatever it may be. And look, there is mixed views on it. Like some are pro, some are against, but I think in the world we're in, we're seeing nitrogen, the amount we can purchase being pulled back. I suppose it's when we are putting it in, it's in our interest to try and make it work as best we can, because ultimately we need to place that chemical nitrogen from somewhere.
Yes,
I suppose another important thing there with the reseeding is picking the right field to reseed. I think sometimes farmers will say that field hasn't been reseeded in 15 years, it's underperforming, compared to the rest of them. Could be a soil fertility issue. It might need lime, it could be low in pH, or it could be index 1 or 2 for P and K. Might only need a couple of tons of lime, to get it back performing again. And even Peter, on the clover side of things, if you are incorporating clover, you need to have a good soil fertility to get that established as well. So
you're up on, we'd always be talking about average, 6.3 is where we want a pH. Clover, you're really 6.5. It's a much more sensitive crop, and even in the P and the K, if it's not there, ultimately it's going to, the clover plant will run out of steam. And in some cases, it's, as you say, it may be the field that hasn't been done in 15 years, but if soil fertility is really low, you could be better look at a different field that that's in check, to give it the best chance of kicking on.
It's like building a house. You need to get the foundation right, and if the foundation isn't right, it's going to suffer.
Yeah, it's important to have your P and K in there when you are reseeding too. Probably particularly if you're ploughing, and you do have that higher P allowance when you are reseeding, but the P is just so important for rooting and just establishing the new sward.
Yeah, I suppose it highlights the importance of our soil sustainability programme, that we're constantly monitoring, let's say, the P and K status, the pH status on your in your fields and your various paddocks. And you're able to, we're back to decision making again, like we were talking about in the silage. We're making a decision where's the best paddock to go with for a reseed. It's all a help.
I suppose just you touched on something very important there, Stephen, with that extra 15 kilos allowance. That's something farmers think, well, I shouldn't say all farmers, but some of our clients, I'm reseeding, how have I not got a P allowance? The reality is some farms, yes, they've 0 P allowance, but they're actually in a deficit, they're in the minus figures. So even though they're reseeding a proportion of the farm, and they think that plus 15 kilos per hectare is only bringing them from, say, minus 200p up to minus 100. So they still might not actually have a P allowance.
Yeah, very true.
So it's just to be important. Don't assume just because I'm reseeding I can purchase that extra 15 kilos a hectare. Actually do the sums and see that you have the allowance. And I suppose ultimately it really shows the importance of how important getting the P is in at sowing. I know in the grassland scenario it's always put in about 30 kilos a hectare when you're doing it. But even in the tillage, a lot of guys be putting it down the spout, placing it right beside the seed, don't they? For that reason.
And it's just very useful to do that, because as we often mentioned, that how immobile a P is, it needs to be within 1 mil of the root, and that's why it's often placed into the seed bed with crops and just right beside the seed, so to maximise the efficiency of it before the P is locked up. As we know, it's P gets locked up very quickly too, so very important to get into the seed bed.
I suppose then with that, then it's always with the side and seal contact. That you're getting the good roll after it, and as you were saying, getting it as close as you can. Obviously in the grasslands now, that's we're using fertiliser spreaders. It's not going to be. I suppose you having the option of probably putting it down the spout as such. It's not common practice. But it's doing all the steps you can. When you go to the effort of building the soil fertility, putting the seed in. That you're finishing off with a good side seal contact. That's ultimately probably one of the important things, regardless of what step, whether you're ploughing, stitching in, or broadcasting. Give it a chance.
Consideration is very important, and it's just something that came into my head there. Back to crops again, seeing a bit of manganese deficiency in spring crops there this spring, but what some people were suggesting to do was to give a field an extra run of the roller, even post emergence. Now maybe be past that stage by now, but it's just something to be wary of. The manganese deficiency, you'll see the loss of colour in the leaves, and it is exacerbated by loose seed beds. So just one other useful tool for mitigating that.
That's savage, lads. Peter, Clodagh, Stephen and John, thanks very much for that. It's always great to have a chat and reassess. Take it a bit easy too on today, but we won't tell the bosses that. Mind yourselves out there. Farm smart, farm safe.
Hey, thanks for listening to the Sod Pod. We hope you enjoyed it. To find out more, head over to www.grasslandagro.ie or check out our social channels: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn and YouTube. That's all for this episode. See you next time.